What's going on, guys, and welcome back. Hopefully you all had a good holiday break. I know I did, but we're back on the grind, this time with Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro. It's a deck that I have always loved. It's a deck that I have my son playing at the current moment, and this is actually the list I have set up for him, and we'll go over the list at the end. First, our 20 match testing results, and then some tips versus matchups. And again, then we'll finish off with the deck list. Link is down below if you would rather just click on that right away. I played 6 Ruby Amethyst controls, went 4-2 versus them, 3-0 versus Tempo, 4-0 versus Popsicle. I think that's probably this deck's best matchup. We went 1-2 against the DeCandino Dwarf Mine Amber Steel Aggro deck, 2-0 versus Blurple, 1-0 versus Purple Steel. I don't think that's a good matchup, but we did get them in our one match that we played against them. And thankfully, we only played one Steel Song. We went 0-1 versus it, and again, that's not a very good matchup. I think pretty much anything with Steel is going to be difficult because they get around your bodyguards pretty easily because of their songs, and they can take out your questing characters really just efficiently. Obviously, Ruby has answers like that too, but outside of Brawl and Sisu Daring Visitor, most of their answers come in late game, where you're trying to close the game out by turn 5, turn 6 the latest. That's kind of where, outside of Popsicle, they start to play the game as turn 5, turn 6-ish. And usually you can get ahead of them pretty easily by then. And versus Popsicle, they might ramp up earlier, but their character presence is very weak in those first 3 turns. And in those first 3 turns, you can jump out to like 12-0 with a good board presence to push for like 17-18 on turn 4 by the time they even get a single character down. So I think that matchup is just very clean. Had 11 matches on the play, and I won 10 of them. On the draw, however, I had 9 matches, and we went 5-4 in those 9. On the games was a little bit different. I always tell people when looking at this chart, look at the game percentage more than the match percentage, because I think it tells a bit better of a story, especially for like DLC, stuff like that, where it's a 2-game format, not a best of 3. I was 18-7 on the play. I think that this deck is very good on the play. It's if you hit your hand and you have a very clean hand, it's very dominant on the play. I think that is very true. But likewise can be said, we were 14-12 on the draw. That if you're on the draw, it's not as favorable, right? Like you're gonna struggle. And like I said, I didn't play much Steel, and I played 4 Popsicles. I think I 2-0'd 3 of the Popsicles. So right there is 3 wins on the draw. And as far as games go, even Ruby Amethyst, I think, is tilted in your favor. Tempo, I know Tempo really well, and I think I'd like to think that I can navigate the matchup. I think it's pretty close. Whoever's on the play probably has the better advantage. They might have more answers for you, but if you can just force them to react to your board and play cards like Kit over other cards and just make them respond to you instead of them setting the pace and whatnot, I think that the matchup is very, very handable, very tolerable, very manageable. Blurple, again, a bit slower of a deck, so I think that we are okay there. It's really those Steel decks. If you have a lot of Steel in your meta, I would not play this deck personally. So let's go ahead and talk about some matchups then. Oh, clicked the wrong button there. Popsicle. Again, I think this one's favorable. You want to jump out early. If you can hit, ideally Daisy, or actually maybe not Daisy in this matchup, because you might just be giving them free cards and they don't really have an answer early for like a Lilo anyway. So maybe go for the Lilo in that turn 1 spot over your Daisy. Multiple Quester on turn 1 is the big important. Daisy, Lilo, probably Lilo actually being more important, because otherwise you're just opening up their access to potentially hit a Daring Visitor, to hit a Tipo to get their ramp going, to hit what else, Hiram if they didn't hit it off their mulligan. So maybe Daisy not the best option there. But even if you have to like load up on your ones and on turn 2, like turn 1 you come out with Lilo, Daisy, even Chernobog's followers. Turn 2, if you come back with 2 more 1-drops, that's actually really good, because again, by turn 4 is usually when they start to get character presence down. Turn 3 maybe. I think you'll be sitting in a pretty good spot against this deck overall. Otherwise, things like Lilo, things like Piglet. Lilo, because she keeps coming back, it just provides that constant threat that they have to deal with all the time. They can't just get rid of it and she's gone. She keeps coming back. Especially when you're in top deck mode and you have the extra ink, you know you can pay the 2 just to play her, and it just works out really well in your favor that way. Steel Song. Like I said, this one's not a good matchup at all. So I like things like Daisy Duck. She has 4 willpower. It means that they can't just clean shot her with Cinderella Storm Rage on and she's gone. It takes a little bit more than that to get rid of it. Likewise, I like Diablo and Baloo because they guaranteed effects. When they get rid of your Baloo, when they banish it, you get the 2 lore. When they get rid of your Diablo, you draw a card. So just trying to make smart trades like this. On the draw, you definitely don't want to come out with like a Lilo or Chernobog's Followers or a Magic Broom when they have Cinderella on board, because they're probably just going to Storm Rage on, get rid of it. You wasted a card. They get to draw their card. Yes, they're going to get to draw at some point no matter what, but if you can come out with Daisy, with Diablo, something that at least survives or replaces itself, you're going to be in a little bit better tempo point. Turn 2 then, obviously, trying to come back. You want to protect with bodyguards, but at the same time, it's going to be difficult because they do have all those Steel Songs that they can just get around your bodyguards and not have to worry about it. But your bigger bodies, like your White Roses, your Merlin Fox, your Merlin Goats, your Genies, even your Big Simbas, cards like this, try to control the board state if you can. It's such a weird thing to say from an aggressive deck, but versus Steel Song, they get around your bodyguards, they get around what you're trying to do, and you're heavily unfavored in the matchup. But if you can control that board state, force them to at least hard cast their songs instead of being able to just sing them for free with things like Ariel. If you can get rid of that early, you'll be in a better spot. Still not in a great spot, but you'll be in a little bit better of a spot. Ruby Amethyst control, kind of like Popsicle. You want to jump out early. This one, I don't care as much about giving them the extra characters because they don't ramp. So realistically, Fox would be the biggest character you don't want them to hit would be Fox here off of Daisy, because obviously rush, 4 attack, things like that. But usually too, you can get Fox to trade out with at least your second bodyguard or something, or even just punch like a Followers or a Broom into it after they take out your Simba bodyguard, just to get a good trade on your end for it. But I don't mind Daisy, because if you give them the Mauis, you give them the Elsas, you give them Lady Tremaines, Medusas, yeah, they're really good cards that are going to hurt you on the back end. But again, they come into play when you're just about closing the game out anyway, which, don't get me wrong, sometimes you just stall against this deck and you're at 15 lore and you cannot get that last 5 just because that's what Ruby Amethyst does. Like, they have a lot of great late game threats. Only thing I'd say watch out for, a lot of players are on one big Sisu, so watch out for that Sisu shift. But again, that's turn 6, so you got a little leeway there before you run into issues. So maybe crash something small into that Sisu when they're at 5 ink, because there's a good chance if they ink and go to 6 and they play that Sisu, you're losing everything anyway. So maybe consider taking that trade. Consider throwing your 1/1 Lilo to finish off a Sisu, to do something like that. Like, consider taking that Sisu out, even if it takes 2 characters and you protect your other 4, because otherwise you're losing everything anyway if they shift. Purple Steel, again, it's steel, so it's not very favorable. I could have threw Befuddle in the Steel Song one too. If you can bounce the Cinderella, even on the draw, if you come out with nothing on turn 1, turn 2, you throw down like Daisy, bounce their Cinderella, then you force them to hard cast the Storm, which they're also not going to get to draw. So instead, they're probably going to come back with characters, try to develop their board, giving you essentially a free turn to quest. And if you have more Befuddles, you get to continue to roll with it. So versus any Steel deck, your disruption actions are going to be good cards to have. But versus Purple Steel, they play a little bit less songs, so I definitely think this deck is unfavorable, but it's not like Steel Song. Like Steel Song, you're going to lose the majority, like easily the majority. Purple Steel, it's probably like a a 45, 55, 40, 60. Steel Song, I'd argue, is like 25, 75. Like, you're going to lose a lot more than you're going to win versus that deck. But versus Purple Steel, it's an aggressive deck. They do have better challengers than you do, though, with things like Calhoun, with things like Smee, if they need to. Being able to use like Library to get draws when they're losing their characters. Obviously, we could too, but we're not playing Library. Hint, hint. So getting your bodyguards down, though, protecting your questers, just setting the pace of the match. Make them challenge into you. Make them respond to you. Don't let them be aggressive with a Calhoun there. Make them start responding to you. Befuddle their Calhoun. Get that out of there. Make them have to replay it to go after you that way. Just make them respond to you. Don't let them set the pace of the matchup is my best advice versus Purple Steel. Versus discard, watch out for the Steel Songs. I should have just recorded that once and just throw it on a loop in here. Outside that, the discard aspect, you really don't have to worry about too much because you dump your hand pretty fast a lot of the time. You have Broom, Followers, Diablo that are all going to get you draws. You have Genie that's going to get you draws. So I'm not saying you won't ever have cards in your hand, but realistically, you have a lot of low-cost cards, and it's very easy for you to dump your hand onto the board. So worrying about discard isn't that important. Just try to get out there, win quick. Threats like Daisy are going to be better. Yeah, you're giving your opponent those extra cards, but at the same time, if you hit a song and bury it at the bottom of your deck, you know you're that much more safe. So there is that aspect. Downside, you hit a character, now maybe a song's at the top of their deck and they're going to draw it anyway, so it's catch-22 that goes both ways. But overall, again, I think that this matchup is probably 45-55 at worst. I think out of the Steel matchups, it's probably one of your better Steel matchups. Pretty close to 50-50. Like I said, just because you take the discard aspect out of it, Ursula double singing songs, though, is the biggest worry that you're going to run into on this, especially like a Strength of the Raging Fire. If they get Ursula on 3, turn 4, they get a 4th character down, and they double sing Strength, you're probably losing that game just because it's going to one-shot any 2 of your characters. What do we do against other aggressive decks? Well, you try to be more aggressive than them. You try to control the pace, control the tempo, kind of like I said with Purple Steel. Having something like Lilo that's going to be able to keep coming back and it's going to be able to trade into their 1/1 characters really well. It's going to be able to trade into and finish off characters that only have 1 willpower left. And sure, you might want to be questing a lot of time, but when you have a character that can just start taking out their threats and then essentially come back next turn, a card we're not playing would be, is it a Hey Hey, I believe, a 2-cost card where when it's banished in a challenge, it goes back to your hand. Cards like that in aggro mirrors are actually low-key really good. You crash it into their stuff, you take out their stuff, goes to your hand, you replay it. Next turn, you crash it into their stuff, it goes to your hand, you replay it, and you just get this infinite loop. Obviously, you have to pay for it, but this loop where you always have this card to crash into their stuff while you're protecting your other characters. Again, we're not playing that card. It's just one of those options. Controlling the tempo, controlling the pace, force them to react to you. If you need to react to them, well, try to get to like your Roses, your 3/3 characters, your 4/3 characters, your Befuddles, your actions that are going to slow them down and maybe swing that tempo back into your own favor. So lastly then, we're going to go ahead and move me to the other side, which means you guys know what's up next. We have the deck list to go over. Comes in at about $168, 17 uninkable cards. We see in the cost curve we're at almost 25 1-drop cards. Like I said, very low cost to the deck. Then we got like 11 2s, 11 3s, 10 4s, and just 2 5-cost yellow cards. You probably already know what they are. So on turn 1, going with 18 1-drops in character form. Daisy and Lilo's. I didn't go with Maleficent's too. Lilo, Maleficent can be interchangeable. If you don't have Daisy, Maleficent's work almost as good as far as questing. They work just as good. It's just the willpower you're missing out on. For an uninkable count reason is why I went this route. I felt that 8 multi-questers is pretty good, especially when your turn 2s and 3s have multi-questers as well. But then 10 consistency cards that only cost 1, being your Followers, your Broom, your Diablo, cards that draw, cards, like I said, consistency cards getting you to that end game a little bit quicker. Turn 2, we do have Bodyguard in form of Simba, because we traded out the Kita shift line from the last deck list for the Simba shift line, because we have Azurite C now and we have Big Simba, so it's a really nice card. Piglet, obviously, Piglet and Lilo, I think these are going to be pretty standard in most Amber aggressive decks, just being able to come back and being able to quest for 3, being inkable, both very strong cards to have in your deck lists. On turn 3 then, we got 3 Baloos and 4 Donald Ducks, so we're running a grand total of 11 Bodyguards. I felt like that was a pretty good number. I was actually on 2 Baloos, but we put that third one back in. Just getting that 2 lore is very nice. For those who didn't see, my son recorded a video with me on Amber Steel Aggro, and he took 2nd place when we went to a small locals the one day, and he went 0-2 versus Ruby Amethyst, which in the final round, and it was against a really good player in our local area. But my son actually could have won game 2 had he had a little more practice and we covered more things. He was at 18 lore, and his opponent had a character with 3 strength, and it was exerted. And instead of challenging the Baloo to get the 2 lore, he quested, went to 19, and ended up losing on the following turn. But again, that was just something that I have not taught my 7-year-old yet. So we're still learning, or yeah, we are still learning the game. I'm still learning as well. Anyone who says they're not learning anymore is falling behind. Donald Ducks, though, being able to give that extra lore to a character. Like, so if you hit like one of your 1-drops on 1, Piglet on 2, you go to 2 on turn 2, then turn 3, you're going to be threatening another 5, but it's a 6 because of Donald, and all of a sudden you're at 8 lore on turn 3, and then you're just sitting in a really good spot again. You're threatening to go to 14 potentially turn 4, and then game on turn 5, right where you want to be on curve. When you're trying to get stalled, well, not when you're trying to get stalled out, when you're getting stalled out and you're trying to close out the game, White Rose is just another option to gain that free lore, and it's inkable, and it's a 3/3 body, which helps you just fight back when you really need to. Tinkerbell is an evasive threat that quests for 2, and I'd had 2 extra spots, and I'm like, okay, I want a multi-quest. I'm like, what about evasives? I'm like, let's throw Tinkerbell in there, because if they can't answer her, unanswered Tinkerbell can rack up lore sneakily quick. So we're going to go throw her in there. And plus then, if you force out things like Brawl and whatnot on your Tinkerbell Fast Flyer, it helps survive your Genie a little bit longer, because he also falls victim to those cards and quests for 2 and is evasive. So these 2 cards, unanswered, can really rack it up pretty quick for you. Dolores is just another draw outlet card who also quests for 2, and she's a 3/3 body. So not only can you use her to crash into things if needed, you can quest for 2 with her as needed, and usually she gets you a draw. If your opponent doesn't have an exerted card and you have a different card to play, by all means play the different card. Wait till they have an exerted card, play her, draw a card. Goat, again, just kind of like White Rose, finishing out games. Nothing feels better than when you're up like 18-8 and you slap a goat down and nothing they do is going to matter. And then lastly, 2 Simbas, just being able to ready the rest of your characters, shifting them over your Simba Bodyguard, questing for 2, 4/4 body. Lots of good things about it. We already talked about Befuddle a little bit there, but I'm stuck. This card has been sneaky good into a lot of things, even those steel matchups, like with that Calhoun takes out your Bodyguard and they're getting the lore for it, or Calhoun just taking out your Piglet. Your Piglet's going to come in exerted. They're like, well, you're just going to Calhoun into it, kill it anyway. But I'm Stuck has been a very sneaky card to keep their card exerted, so that way they can't challenge me with it on their next turn. I like it in tandem with Befuddle. Befuddle 9 times out of 10 in turns 1, 2, 3 is better, because you're setting the tempo of that earlier. You're getting the threat off the board. They need to pay ink to replay it. You're just slowing their whole roll down. But as the game progresses on, when you're just trying to close that game out, keeping their character exerted can be very big. In Steel Song, you can keep their singer exerted. So once again, you're making them either not sing that song this turn, or you're forcing them to hard cast it. So I'm Stuck has actually been sneaking in and doing really, really well for me. But overall, that is the deck. Let me know down below what you guys think. And the matchup tips in the beginning. Is it time we put Dwarf Mine in there? I think it might be time we put Dwarf's Mine in there. So if you see a little bit different, a little bit shift, in which decks we talk about. That's why I think it's time. I think the meta's moved around a little bit enough that we can change those decks up. Thank you guys for watching. What other decks would you like to see? As always, too, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Good stuff like that. Steel Song is almost done, and our Emerald Steel Pirate updated with results is also almost done. So thank you guys for watching once again. Take care.